And this is a key point around leadership. How do people feel about themselves when they're in your presence?
Mm.
How do people feel about themselves? Do they feel uplifted or do they feel denigrated? Do they feel challenged or do they feel not good enough?
Yeah.
I mean, fill in the blanks here. A leader's job, in large part, is to ensure that their people find ways to emotionally connect with what the organization's goals and objectives are. Its soul.
Mm.
And if they can do that well, they're going to have people that are participating all out. And the challenge is it's not one size fits all. And this was the beauty of what the work that I was doing with Starbucks is.
You're listening to the Real Business Connections Network. Real Business Connections Network. Powered by Balbert Marketing, LLC. Subscribe now and check us out at realbusinessconnections.com. Enjoy the show.
Welcome, everyone, to Learn, Speak, Teach, powered by Balbert Marketing, LLC. If you love to learn, be inspired, and succeed, we're here to speak and teach. I'm your host, Ben Albert. I believe if you're not living, you're dying. If you're not growing, you're withering. And if you're not engaged, you can turn this off right now. Because we here at LST are lifelong learners. And listen, I'm not your guru. I'm an ordinary guy on a journey to learn from the experts. My goal is to host each conversation with a beginner's mindset. Learn and let the experts speak and teach their truths. Join us! Oh yeah, and don't forget to subscribe. This episode is brought to you completely free. Get some stake in the game here. My fee for the show only takes a few moments. If you gain value from the episode, personally share with a friend and explain your favorite part. Bonus points. Please leave us a review on Apple, Google Podcasts, or anywhere you listen to the show. All right, let's get started. Welcome, everyone, to Learn, Speak, Teach on the Real Business Connections Network. I am here today with Blaine Bartlett. Blaine, what's up?
Hey.
How are you? Such a pleasure.
Ben, my pleasure completely. I've been looking forward to this conversation for a while, so I'm glad we're finally crossing the T and dotting the I here.
Same. It's been on the calendar for a couple of months. I've had plenty of time to listen to your TED Talk and listen to your podcast and dive and do research, but no spoilers yet. We'll dive into the good stuff in a moment. First, for the listener that hasn't yet met Blaine, Blaine Bartlett is a leadership and executive coach, Bloomberg TV co-host, best-selling author, keynote speaker, entrepreneur, philosopher, consultant, and many other things. He is the author of Compassionate, that's Compassionate Capitalism, and the host of the Soul of Business podcast. Blaine, you ask your guest this question, so I wanted to ask it to you. What does the soul of business, what does that mean to you?
Ben, that's a great question. And you're right. I ask this question all the time of the guests on my show. Carl Jung, a long time ago, obviously because Carl Jung lived a long time ago, but he said that essentially the soul of anything is that spark that gives it life, not only gives it life, but gives the life meaning. And every company, and I don't care how large or how small the company is, was sparked by a dream that somebody had. A dream to make a difference, a dream to bring a product or service to the marketplace. And it's that dream that quickens everything. It's alive. And I've worked with founders, entrepreneurs a lot, and these are vibrant people. These are folks that are, I'll date myself here a little bit, but they really are kind of like Crusader Rabbit. They're out there just wanting to charge the hill, plant the flag, and make it work. The soul of business is what keeps the organization vibrant. Yeah, it's not numbers, it's not goals and objectives. It's the soul of the business that keeps it vibrant. It's that for the sake of what do we do what we do. And when you can connect people to that in a meaningful way, well, I'll tell you, all bets are off. I mean, you can rock the stadium when you can tap into that soul, and it transforms the work experience. It transforms the experience of what it means to be a business person, and that's what it means to me. It's about life.
It's about life. And so we all want to tap into it. Is the soul business isn't like a defined specific thing? Does each business have its own character traits and its own soul? Just like a human does as well?
I mean, I'm sitting here looking at you on the Zoom podcast. Every person I meet, they look unique, and they look unique because they are unique. They're a unique expression of a soul. And I don't mean this in a religious sense. They're a unique expression of a soul that looks to create. It's that soul aspires to grow, and it grows in unique ways. It expresses itself in unique ways. And so, I mean, just to carry the metaphor a little bit, I have this corporeal body, and I've got my thinking, I've got my mindset, I've got everything that makes Blaine Blaine. And in that uniqueness, there's an expression that when and this is where authenticity comes into play. When I can express myself authentically, what I'm actually doing is expressing my soul in a way that makes a difference out there, but also in here, internally to me. When I'm connected to it, I feel alive. When I'm disconnected to it, life's a chore. And life doesn't have to be a chore. I mean, it doesn't mean that there's not obstacles, but the obstacles are just a part of life. I mean, if you don't have obstacles, you're not stressed, and if you're not stressed, you're not growing. And so, kind of getting in front of that curve is an important piece for entrepreneurs to pay attention to.
If you're not stressed, you're not growing. I say in the intro of this podcast, if you're not living, you're dying. And if you're not here to grow, you can turn this off right now.
Yeah, absolutely.
A little more words than that. But so I'm wondering, and I start with your accolades, but it wasn't always like that. I'm sure it wasn't easy. I'm sure you had struggles. I'm curious as to what the soul of your business and what you get to do today is. Like, talk a little bit about your values and what you do. But beyond that, what got you there? Maybe walk us through a little bit of that journey to where you were able to determine what those values are and who those people you were going to be able to get to serve, et cetera, et cetera. Take it any way you want.
Okay. Boy, that's a greenfield opportunity here. There's a lot of ways to run with that. I'll start kind of back at the beginning. I grew up on a farm in rural Oregon. And one of the things that I remember most vividly, and I talk about this in one of my TED Talks, is walking through nature. As a young boy, just marveling at what happened when a seed was put in the ground, and then 6 weeks later, there's this little thing that pops up, and 2 months later, I've got this incredible, cornucopia of produce. The hay, the corn, whatever it was that we were working with. But everything in nature seemed to be connected. I was struck by seasonality. When things went dormant, it's kind of like I'd look around, and it was so fundamentally different than what spring looked like, and definitely different than what summer looked like. And it was kind of like, wow, all of this stuff. Nature became my greatest teacher. I mean, it truly did. So fast forward, when I got into business, I started paying attention to how organizations seem to be functioning. And in my experience, and this goes back a whole bunch of years, but in my experience, almost every organization that I was ever a part of or ever was fortunate enough to be working with as a consultant, they all seem to be in some way toxic to the human spirit. And this kind of goes back to what we were just talking about, the soul of business. They were devoid of soul. They were devoid of aliveness. And that's not to say that there weren't objectives and goals and things that were exciting and all that kind of stuff. But the true impact of what was going on in that organization was organized around ensuring that people were cogs in a wheel that was chewing out, predictable outcomes. And when I say predictable outcomes, these were incremental growth strategies. let's raise our revenue by 5%, overnight over last year. Incremental growth is stagnation.
Talk about that for a moment.
Is.
Talk about that for a moment.
It's predicated on what I did before. So when people are setting goals and objectives in most organizations, their reference point is, what did we do last year? Or do we know somebody that has done something similar to what we'd like to do? And it ends up being an incremental process. There's no breakthroughs necessarily that occur. Life is about breakthroughs. You plant the seed, you nurture it, and all of a sudden it explodes in this unbelievable growth that was unexpected in some way. It was, it's kind of like, God, I didn't know it was going to take that form. And it's kind of like, wow. And then it just flourishes. Most organizations aren't set up to flourish because they don't provide the mechanisms by which that happens. And one of the ways that I worked with this, if you just think about goals, and this is, for the listening audience here, a lot of folks, that are listening are entrepreneurs. I mean, you're looking at revenue, you're looking at how do I, make more money? How do I actually generate more revenue and then increase my profit margins? There's goal setting comes into play around that. Now, there's 3 types of goals. And this is something that I work with all the time. There are 3 types of goals. There's an A-type goal, which is something that I already know how to do. Mm-hmm. And there's nothing wrong with an A-type goal, but I know how to do it. So there's no growth involved with it. And then there's a B-type goal, which is something that I haven't yet done, but I know somebody that has done it, or I know, and this is where best practices come into play. Go find somebody that's done it, replicate it, and you're off to the races, hopefully. Little bit of growth is involved with that. I stretch myself a little bit. So, again, both of those are legitimate objectives, legitimate things to focus on. Where we get screwed up is that we don't understand what the purpose of a goal is. A purpose of a goal is not to get. And this is how most organizations are set up. Most organizations are set up and they set goals to get something, to get a 5%, 8%, 10% revenue increase. Mm-hmm. It doesn't work in the way that you want it to work. The real purpose of a goal is to grow, and not just grow incrementally, to grow in the way that your spirit desires to grow. We all have dreams. So that comes into play with this 3rd type of goal, which I call a growal. It's a growal. And it's
how do you spell that? How do you spell
that? Growal. Growal.
Let's do it. Okay.
It's a growal. And a growal is something that I would absolutely love to have. I would love to have this thing. I don't have a bloody clue in the world about how to go about getting this. I don't know anybody that's ever done it. I don't know. I don't have an idea even what the first step could be. But I let the desire for that goal, what would I love, guide me. I don't have to know the how. And this is the second thing that happens in most organizations is we get imprisoned by questions around how. Mm-hmm. How do I do this? How do we start? I mean, forget the how. Leverage the what do I want. Set it in front, and then you will find the ways to make it happen. That's a goal, and it will stretch you in ways you've never imagined. You'll start connecting dots in ways that you've never even thought of. Resources will appear. People will appear. I mean, all kinds of things begin to appear if you're actually organizing yourself and your organization in that context. I mean, it's a powerful way to grow. It's what nature does. It's what nature does. Nature doesn't set a B-type goal. It's kind of like, well, I'm going to grow 5% more. It doesn't do that.
We sometimes set it for it.
Yeah, let me have it. I mean, I want it all. And I don't mean that in the sense of consumption, but I want to express, I want to have my world and who I am in my world be as full and as rich as it possibly can be. That's when businesses can take off, is when you've got people that are aligned with that kind of an ethos.
I'm grabbing my pencil, Blaine. Let's do the concise. Is there a simple process here? How do I start determining my goals? Where do I start? And then once I have a little bit of clarity on what they are, what should I do?
The place to start, real honestly, is with the question, what would I love? What would I love? Now, that is a minefield question. I mean, it truly is.
Yes.
Because when you are honest with yourself, a lot of what will come up is not what you currently have. A lot of what people organize their lives around is what other people think they should have. And yeah, you start going to what would I love? That begins to create some very interesting conversations with yourself first, because it always starts with self first. And then you start looking at, okay, how do we go about making this happen? And that moves into the whole domain of leadership, which is for me, that's my playpen. I mean, that's where I work, is in the domain of leadership. How do we get things moving together?
Why leadership? Go on.
Why leadership?
Yeah, answer. Finish your thought if you'd like. But yeah, I'm curious why leadership of all things.
If I'm not leading, well, two things on this. If I'm not leading my life, somebody else is going to lead it for me.
True.
So I want to be very clear about that. But most people don't understand what leadership is. And I've been playing in this field for about 40 years. I mean, literally. And I have come up with a definition. I've seen just about everything under the sun. I've worked with military. I've done a lot of stuff in the field of leadership. A lot of definitions out there. I've come up with one that I think is absolutely bulletproof. It's the process, it's the activity of co-creating coordinated movement in a system that produces the results that you want. We all live and work in systems. And nature lives and works in a system. It's an interconnected system. Everything's interconnected. So this definition, co-creating coordinated movement, two pieces to it. The coordinated movement piece is what most people think of when they think of leadership. Coordinated movement. Let's get people aligned. Get them on the same page. I mean, that kind of stuff. If I've got a big enough stick or a big enough pot of money, I can get anybody to move.
Sure.
But that looks like compliance. And compliance is a horrible place to work from. And that's what most organizations actually, find themselves dealing with.
We got leaders.
And the co-creation piece is the magic sauce in leadership. It truly is. Co-creation. It's how do we make this happen? How do we decide that this is valuable? And that co-creation isn't something that can be dictated. It's an invitation to participate. And the most effective leaders I've ever worked with are those that have cracked the code, literally, in figuring out how to co-create before they get to coordinated movement. The coordinated movement is the how. The co-creation is organized around a question, for the sake of what are we doing this, which goes back into the soul of the business.
I love this. I want a case study, an example. I know just by reading about you, you've worked with people like Starbucks. You can use them as an example, or anyone else. Well, what's a business that you've worked with that really just has been aligned and co-creating properly, and just kind of walk through what they were doing right?
Yeah. Well, you mentioned Starbucks. I spent about 5 years working with them, and worked at the very top of that organization. Howard Schultz, everybody gets something wrong all the time. Nothing's perfect. Starbucks isn't perfect, so I'm not going to pretend that they are. A good friend of mine, Raj Sisodia, was a co-author with John Mackey. John was the founder of Whole Foods. Together, they wrote a book called Conscious Capitalism.
Yes.
Before they wrote that book, Conscious Capitalism, Raj wrote another book called Firms of Endearment. I love that title, Firms of Endearment.
I love the
And these were companies, Starbucks was included in this group, that absolutely blew the doors off from a performance standpoint of any other class of organizations that they were actually measuring. This went back to Jim Collins' good to great companies. They compared the S&P index, and these companies that he called firms of endearment absolutely were stellar in just about any metric that you wanted to pay attention to. And I'm mentioning this for this reason. When we looked at Starbucks, when I was working with Starbucks, they paid attention not just through lip service, but they paid attention to how are they emotionally engaging their partners. And they called their people, and they still do, they call their employees partners. And it's not just artifice. I mean, they're not just saying that just to kind of look good. They actually treat them, and this goes back when I was working with them. They were treating them as partners. They did, on a very regular basis, not just once a year, but on I think it was almost quarterly. They would run the Gallup surveys that had to do with emotional engagement. Are you an engaged organization? They were off the charts with this. So they would pay a lot of attention to how people felt about themselves when they were in the presence of the organization's goals and objectives, when they were in the presence of the organization's leaders. And this is a key point around leadership. How do people feel about themselves when they're in your presence? How do people feel about themselves? Do they feel uplifted, or do they feel denigrated? Do they feel challenged, or do they feel not good enough? Yeah. I mean, fill in the blanks here. A leader's job, in large part, is to ensure that their people find ways to emotionally connect with what the organization's goals and objectives are. Its soul. And if they can do that well, they're going to have people that are participating all out. And the challenge is it's not one size fits all. And this was the beauty of what the work that I was doing with Starbucks, is that they were actually paying attention to making sure that this was individually tailored in many ways to the individuals that were actually participating in the work process. Another company that comes to mind is WD-40. Now, Starbucks is retail. Yeah, go get a cup of coffee. It's a retail. WD-40 is a manufacturing product. I mean, everybody's got a can of WD-40 in their pantry someplace that they use, or in their garage. That let's break the rust free here so that I can get something.
It's funny because I don't always have a big smile when I need to use the WD-40. Maybe when I'm getting my first cup of coffee. So I'm really curious about this, because WD-40 to me sounds boring and bland.
WD-40 is one of the most fascinating companies I've ever experienced and ever come across. I had the great fortune of interviewing their CEO a couple of different times, and have had a couple of different conversations with him. Now, he's retired. Actually, this is August. He's retiring this month. He's been in position for almost 20 years now. WD-40's been around since the 50s. Actually, it predated the space race. They got their start as a lubricant, not as a lubricant, as a water repellent. In the early space race. Space age. But what's important about WD-40 is their employee engagement scores consistently are in the 90% range. It's it's unheard of. And it's all because they pay attention to the experience that their people have while they're at work. Not just at work, but how do they carry that home with them? So if they're not having a good day at work, they're not going to have a good day when they go home. So, and again, this isn't about making nice with people. It's about ensuring that what we're doing is meaningful in a significant and personal way. And I'll say that again. It's making sure that what we're doing is meaningful in a personal and significant way. And when you can make that possible, things begin to open up, because all of a sudden you access people's genius. Yeah. And this is one of the things that was true with Starbucks. It's also true with WD-40. Ideas come from the field. They would come up with these, if there was a problem, it wasn't the leader's job to solve the problem. It was, hey guys, we're in this together, co-creating, coordinated movement. Issue comes up. How are we going to address this? Because what we say we want is meaningful. So let's find a way to make it happen.
I love this. Let's make it happen. I have a hilarious analogy in my head right now, Blaine, because for some reason there's flies in the house and they kept on flying in front of my eyes, kind of like breaking my eye contact. And I'm thinking to myself, if there's a fly in the house, I don't want someone else in the house to be, Ben, come get the fly. You want them to be empowered to swat that fly when it's right in front of you and then tell you how they did it.
Yep.
It's everybody's responsibility.
Yeah, and that's the other piece of this, man. Honestly, responsibility. I can't tell you how many times I've worked with companies where they say we have an accountability problem. People aren't willing to take accountability. Well, no kidding. It's because the minute they do, somebody chops them off at the knees. It's kind of like when I was working with Bell Laboratories, and this goes back into the 1980s. And this is shortly after AT&T was divested. I mean, they were broken up, and I worked in a number of the different baby bells. But Bell Labs sticks in my mind for this reason. The old AT&T system had something that was called Bell Operating Procedures, BOPs, the Bell Operating Procedures. And I think if memory serves, it was about a 20-volume set of operating procedures.
Yeah.
And if you went into a middle manager or any manager's office, if they had an office, on the credenza in back of their desk was the BOPs. And if you wanted to do something that was kind of out of the norm, the flag would go up, and it's kind of like, whoa, hold on. Let's see if it's in the BOPs. If it's not in the BOPs, we don't do it. And I mean, it was fascinating to me that innovation was stifled. Now, what's interesting about that is Bell Labs was an incredibly innovative organization. The transistor was invented there. I mean, the stuff that was invented when when AT&T was divested, the fundamental mission of Bell Labs, as an example here, they were a pure R&D portion of the old AT&T system. Pure R&D. All they did was research and develop and invent it. How cool is that? Now, after divestiture, they had to justify what they were doing within the context of revenue. Is this a viable commercial product? And that fundamental, seemingly simple little shift from a business perspective was unbelievably disruptive inside that organization, because what used to be meaningful was now no longer meaningful. Invent just for the sake of invention, discover just for the sake of discovery. Now it had to have a commercial viability. And a lot of these scientists were going, that's not what you paid me for. You paid me to invent.
Right.
And so that meaning, all behavior is organized around meaning making processes. And if it's not meaningful, you're going to see people doing all kinds of squirrely things behaviorally.
It makes perfect sense.
Yeah. Most of it just to kind of, get you out of my face long enough for me to get back to my coffee.
Yeah, I need to grab my coffee. Let's move on. I've said it a million times, human to human marketing. I'm a marketing professional, and humans sell to humans, who fulfill by humans, that service humans, that renew with humans. And even if it's an automated tool, it was made for humans by humans. So why wouldn't we treat marketing and sales and conversations with what you call compassion and compassionate capitalism?
Yep.
So we've kind of touched on it, but let's maybe define the difference or the divide. Like what is conscious capitalism versus what you now call and have coined compassionate capitalism? What's the difference between the two?
Well, I'll go back to what I mentioned a little bit ago. John Mackey, Raj Sisodia, both of them are very good friends of mine. And when they wrote the book Conscious Capitalism, it was kind of like, wow, it was kind of a clarion wake-up call for folks. And there was awareness of this is a larger deal than what we thought it was, this whole thing of business. And it was an awareness that there are stakeholders beyond the shareholder group. There are stakeholders out there that are absolutely critical to the organization's success. And that awareness begins to organize choices and decision-making in a little bit different fashion. Now, awareness is one thing. The behavioral analog to conscious capitalism is compassionate capitalism. The behavioral analog. because it's predicated on how I recognize that we are fundamentally connected. And based on that realization of connection, I start to behave in a way that is, in my terms, compassionate. It's not a feel-good thing. Mm-hmm. It's about, I recognize that if you're not winning, I'm not winning. And this goes literally back to the beginning of capitalism, when Adam Smith wrote The Wealth of Nations in 1776. He basically coined the phrase, the invisible hands of commerce. The invisible hands of commerce, and then a little history lesson for your listeners here, was sourced out of a book that he wrote about, I think it was about 16 years prior to Compassion, or the Wealth of Nations. That was the theory of moral. My brain just went dead here. Theory of moral sentiment. The theory of moral sentiment.
You got it. I was about to Google it.
Yeah, but that book was, and that basically it was a book, but it basically said that everything in life is connected in some way, shape, or form, and that morally aware individuals. I'm very loosely paraphrasing here, but folks that are working from a moral platform here, again, not religious, but a moral platform here, recognize connection as the linchpin of everything. And they will still work in service of their own self-interest, but they do so with an eye towards the consequence of that on others. So there's this enlightened self-interest that kind of comes into play. And this is where the invisible hands of commerce actually came from. It's predicated on enlightened self-interest. Yes, I need to win, but I can't win at the expense of my partners. And again, the word partner, Starbucks uses this. Partners, my stakeholders, in the broadest sense, my community, my vendors, my suppliers, my bankers. Yeah, these are all partners of mine in some way, shape, or form. And if I'm operating in a way that is compassionate, I will take them into consideration as well as myself. And ultimately, what ends up occurring is I make decisions as a business leader and as a business that is in alignment with the Hippocratic Oath. First, do no harm. First, do no harm. The purpose of business is to uplift the experience of living on this planet. The purpose of business is not to make money. Making money is a consequence of doing things well.
Right.
And if you're doing things well in this context, you are actually providing services or products that are uplifting to the experience of living, not just for human beings, but uplifting to the experience of being alive on this planet, for fish, for birds, for earth. Take your, just kind of take it.
Talk a little bit about that. So it's not just for human beings, it's for preservation as well.
Preservation.
Go on that a little bit. Tell us a little bit about that. Or maybe some of the things you do, because I know you're part of like a lot of, go on and tell us, I know you and your wife are part of different charities and organizations, right?
Yeah. My wife founded an organization called the Unstoppable Foundation. She founded it about 12 years ago, and we do an incredible amount of good work, quote unquote, good work in sub-Saharan Africa. We've got about 100,000 individuals that are touched daily by the work that the foundation is doing there. Clean water, healthcare, nutrition, education, economic development in the communities. And the whole focus of what she does and the foundation does, and I'm on the board, so I am biased here, but it's all organized around sustainability. And I mean sustainability in the sense that when we work with a community, as an example, within about 5 years, we can walk away and it's up and running, it's sustainable. Yeah. Health is in place. Nutrition is in place, education is in place, economic development has taken hold. So they're not just subsistent farmers. All of these things begin, and then there's potable water, for everybody to drink. So they're not, pulling water out of a stream that, an elephant has pooped in.
Yeah.
So all of that stuff. So it's all predicated on this notion of connection. That's a full circle here. Compassion. It's impossible for me to be compassionate about anything that I do not feel connected to. So part of my charter and the business that I run and the work that I do is finding ways for people to recognize that everything is connected and that your business is in fact connected to anybody that it touches, not just the consumer that buys something, but anybody or anything that your business touches. This is where the carbon footprint comes in. I mean, all kinds of stuff here. So how do I mitigate downward negative consequences and uplift the positive that I can bring to the table? That's what we're looking at.
So this is something that can be learned. It's not something that I'm just born with. I know they say, they're born with this, born with that. You can't teach blank. You can teach this. Mm-hmm. Organizations can learn this.
Yeah.
Where should they start to learn it? Obviously, it can be your book. You can shout out your book, but where do I start learning this at a deeper level so I can actually implement it into my life?
You start by getting curious. Honest to God, that's if you're not curious about this, I don't care what you do. It's just not going to work. But you got to be curious about, even if you think this is a fool's errand, even if you think I'm naive, I've been in business for 45 years. I'm not naive. I've been up and down. I've been sideways, everything else. But if you think that, this is utopiistic, absolutely, it is utopia. It is. And that's the magic of this. Oscar Wilde, and this is a rough quote here. Oscar Wilde at one point, the playwright, said, "Without the striving for utopias, mankind has never progressed." And landing on the shores of that utopia, they once again scan the seashore out into the horizon and they see another land that looks better and they strive for that one. Utopia is something to aspire to. It's always going to be, and this goes back into the soul of business. I want to have my life be a utopia. I truly do. That goes back to what would I love? So the question, where do I start? I start by getting curious. And then, how do I learn something about this? I mean, go to my website, blainebartlett.com. I've got a lot of stuff up there. Most of it's for free. I've learned, I've earned, and now I'm returning. So there's a lot of stuff that I'm giving back. That sort of thing. Read Compassionate Capitalism, get the book, or read Conscious Capitalism, get that book. There's a lot of material out there that speaks to this notion. And if you're a business leader, honest to God, if you're a business leader, you can't afford not to be paying attention to this. You really can't.
It's going to make all the difference in all of our worlds. I haven't read the book yet, so I'm just being transparent.
I'll send it to you. Give me your address when we're done here. I'll send you a copy.
Will do. And wow, I'm going to dive into that. Talk a little bit about your podcast. We kind of tongue-in-cheek opened with one of your favorite questions on the Soul of Business podcast. Well, if I go subscribe, what should I expect out of that show?
I'm fortunate enough to have access to a whole lot of different folks. And the whole idea on the show is literally the soul of business. What does it mean to actually run a business from the perspective that it has a soul that aspires to be great? And I've got, oh goodness, Bob Proctor's been on. I've had Army generals on. It's just a broad spectrum. I've had marketers on. I've had small entrepreneurs that are doing some fascinating things. So it's business people primarily that are doing stuff in the business world that, from my perspective, makes a difference. And from their perspective, it does also. It makes a difference. And so we just riff about it. I don't really have a set format. It's just a conversation. So the Soul of Business podcast is a conversation. It literally is a conversation about life lived as a business person, life lived fully as a business person. And there's some fascinating stuff that comes out of it.
We're living life fully. We're creating a utopia for ourselves, but that's not possible unless you're creating that utopia for people around you. And it sounds like you're talking I'm trying to remember. So was Javon McCormick on your show?
Yeah, Javon was on. Yeah.
I was scrolling through and I recall seeing his name. I haven't listened to it yet. He was on my show. Part of what reminded me of him when you were talking earlier is about partnership, and we're in this together. And he always preaches, on the pyramid. I mean, first off, there's no pyramid. It's more of a flat line. And if you go to the website, oftentimes it's the president, CEO at the top of the bios. They're the top dog. They're the one everyone wants to see. He puts himself at the bottom of the list in the biography because it's his job to serve everyone above him. And I'm just nerding out about Javon because you guys can go scroll down a few, and I'll put that in the show notes. He was on my podcast, but honestly, that would be a great place for someone to start on your podcast, right? Go to Soul of Business and listen to Blaine with Javon McCormick.
We had a great conversation. Absolutely. I mean, it was one of the most enjoyable ones I've had in a long, long time. He's a good guy, really good guy.
I don't think it's possible not to have a fascinating conversation with that gentleman. He's seen it all. He's done it all. And talk about compassionate capitalism. I mean, he's just a brilliant guy who truly cares about his team.
Yeah, he certainly does. Yeah.
So I always end with a rapid fire round just to get to know you personally a little bit better. No right or wrong answers, just short and sweet. I say it's like Family Feud, that we want to kind of go rapid fire and quick, but it's whose line is it anyway, where the points don't matter. It's completely subjective to whatever the heck we want to say or do. So we'll start off soft with coffee or tea.
Coffee.
Favorite season?
Spring.
Take some time with this one because I know you've traveled, you've worked on like every continent. Like, what are some of your favorite places to just relax, ease off, and take a vacation?
The Amalfi Coast in Italy. I love Italy. Yeah, the food, the wine, the people, but the coastline, the Amalfi Coast. I absolutely am in love with the Amalfi Coast. And actually, where I'm at, up here on this island, I love being on this island. We've got 11 acres on the water here, and it's nature. It's one of my favorite places in the world.
You started with a fascination with nature. Now you're back with it stays with you forever, right? And it's within all of us. So, wow. What else should I ask you? I guess a big one is what's getting you out of bed in the morning? What's new and exciting? What are you looking forward to? What should we look forward to? What is in the horizon, Blaine?
Well, got a couple of things coming on. You mentioned Bloomberg TV. We have just recently, one of my very good, dearest friends, Dave Meltzer. David and I co-host the Bloomberg TV show. We're also co-hosting this office hours show on Apple TV now. So we've got both Bloomberg and Apple TV. And I mention that because we're going to be taking Soul of Business, my podcast, and we're going to be actually next year starting to film about 10 episodes for Apple TV.
Wow.
Of the Soul of Business. So we're just beginning to set that up. What gets me out of bed in the morning is what's gotten me out of bed in the morning for years. I want to make a difference. And my life is about teaching. If somebody asked me what my mission would be or who I am, I'd say I'm a teacher. I teach, therefore I am. So teaching is a verb. God is a verb.
Yes.
So it's about movement. I teach, therefore I am. That brings me the greatest joy in my life, is to be able to be in a position to teach. And it's not dogmatic, one way. It's kind of, let's learn this together, co-create this thing. I've got a new mastermind program. I run a mastermind program, leadership mindset mastermind. Every year we start a new cycle on it, and we're just wrapping up the second cohort on that this month. So the next cohort is going to be beginning in October. So if your listeners are interested in learning more about this co-creation of coordinated movement, this is the place to go. It is a world-class mindset, and I only take about 10 people into it. It's pretty selective, folks that are really serious about learning what it means to be a highly effective leader. And you can find out more about it at Blaine Bartlett, or learn.blainebartlett.com/LMM, Leadership Mindset Mastermind.
Love it. And this will officially come out in September. So it sounds like that maybe only a few slots yet left, but you do this every year. It's ongoing. If someone misses it this year, My hope is that someone's listening to this podcast like 200 years down the road in the future. And by then you would probably already codified it all and had a virtual training and they could watch it there. But I need to slow down a little bit. You plan on running this for a little while. If I miss the punch, I need to sign up for the next one.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you miss the beginning of it, because I've got some folks in the second cohort that actually came in about mid-course. So they're going to be carrying over and picking up and catching up on what they didn't get on the front end of this last iteration. So I start it new every year, but that doesn't mean folks can't come in at any time. They just will carry over into the next cycle until they've completed the year, and they'll get the full treatment. It's a full year, and it's personally facilitated by me. I facilitate every week a mastermind session with the folks that are in this group.
Fascinating. I might join. No promises, but wink, wink. I might be joining. I love everything you're doing, guys. All these links will be in the show notes. Make the show notes your friend. I had timestamps, so if there's something you want to rewind back to,